Actually, the first one with that proper title, since last year it was just the interest group meeting, and now that we have now that the new charter has been adopted and this group formally been renamed, is now the maintenance group meeting. Thanks, Erica, for reposting the link to the notes. So we only have a relatively short agenda for today, and I also know that Anton has to leave a bit earlier today, so I guess it won't be as long. And yeah. Okay, so let me quickly, I prepared a few slides. Let me quickly share this. And no, wrong screen, the other way around. This way, yeah. So yeah, as I said, welcome. I don't think we need an introductory round today. As I said, that's the short URL already in the chat. So yeah, a bit of an update what has happened so far and what mostly I have been working on, even though it's not too much. So as I already said, yeah, well, no, we made a bit of progress last year, but not as much as I had hoped to. But we do have a formally accepted new charter now. And with that, I also updated the community page on the TEDWIG website. Just, yeah, pretty much parts of the agenda with some additional information. Let me quickly paste the link in the chat. Can I? How do I access the chat when I'm screen sharing? See your windows.
Often like a little hover bar over your shared screen.
Yeah, no, usually, but I don't see it this time. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it's static community / ABCD. So not much more of a surprise. And also, I already reported this a bit last year that within the one project we are taking a closer look at bioschemas as a standard for adding information within web pages. So it's an extension to schema.org. And a colleague of ours has been working on a mapping and also quite detailed to bioschemas and schema.org. And we are also having a first transformation tool. So it lets you take ABCD files and then transform it into the bioschemas. For now, it's only working on the dataset level, but we are planning on extending this for the unit level. And this is a bit tricky because the schema.org has it works quite well for specimens, so herbarium sheets, for instance. It's a bit more tricky for observations. And then there are like all of the other types of record bases which we have ignored so far because they are not as important to us. But this would then allow us, for instance, if we have a landing page for a specimen, let's say a herbarium sheet, put the metadata of that particular sheet within the HTML file in the bioschemas format. which can then be harvested by other web crawlers. Now I see the bar. Exactly. Thank you, Anton, for posting that link. So that's the transformation service we developed in the one project, and within that, I think it's the mission number 5 is for the bioschemas. All right. Then, oh no, I just noticed I skipped one point there. So for the re-ratification of ABCD2, I reported about this last year. We said we need to re-ratify it under the SDS rules because it's still a prior standard. And for that, we decided, well, we take the last version of 2.06, and then the different subversions. And the latest one is F, so that's the has all the backward compatible changes. So when they change, we had like for instance, some elements were renamed, and we have the old and the new name within there, so it's still like all of the old files are still valid. But for the re-ratification, we only want to focus on the now accepted terms and not the outdated terms. But then when working to this, we had a bit more feedback from different people from the community. Oh, you're missing an element there that we would need, and some requests to add certain elements or some that we should have added earlier but kind of overlooked. And so we decided now to make another of those minor versions, of those subversions, which is going to be 2.06 G. Again, it's only a handful of new elements that will be in there, but that will be now the basis for the re-ratification, where we have then proper documentation for each term. So, for instance, there were some elements missing that don't have a proper identifier field. I don't know it off my head yet, but pretty much the goal is to give every proper class and a field for external identifiers. So you can, for instance, map raw IDs to organizations. I think that was one of the ones that was missing, for instance. To make ABCD better equipped for interlinking with external sources. And another case was, for instance, within the record bases. Within one project, we also have the request for a literature occurrence. I'm not quite sure, does Darwin Core have a literature occurrence? Anybody here know that? So if there's something described only within a literature source, saying person X, I don't know, saw a particular tree within on a particular place, and so you don't have a proper record, but you have historic data that says, okay, something was there, for instance. So that would also be one of those minor additions that we are going to extend. So for that, there's going to be the new version or new subversion. And then, once we have all the terms, they are going to be proper documented. And so the term-based documentation, as it's common now for all of the other standards, and I used the StandDocGen tool written by Ben. And it's not fully done yet, but I can give you a bit of a preview once this page loads. So I got all of the ABCD data in the format that I could read it. with a tool, and then generated documentation pages. It's a bit too
I
big
see
now.
you picked light green for your color.
Yeah, it's the same we have on the old
That's awesome.
ABC documentation.
Yeah.
Those design details are still up for discussion. So I picked the same one we have on
That's great.
here.
Okay.
And yeah.
That's very cool.
And it's also I took the template from the Latimer core example and just pasted in some of the content, but not all
Sure.
of it. So if you're going to see references to Latimer core but within the text, yeah, I will take care of that later on. This is just to show how this is going to be to look, and in particular how we are going to handle the yeah, particularities of XML, of the XML schema within that documentation. So we still have the common header, the abstract keyword definitions. Um, and then we go to the terms. Um, for the terms, we made some rough groupings. So this is not really given by the structure as much as it's by grouping elements that kind of belong together in a logical set. Um, and they're usually based on the hierarchy, but not in all cases. Um, and yeah, so it helps to yeah, look for or where order particular elements, and within that we have then all of the elements that are represented in here. Let's I don't know, take for instance some within the unit context. Let's I don't know say unit ID, and here we have the yeah term I label. So the pretty standard stuff, and then we have the XPath. Um, the parent and the group. And here we have to distinguish between like the group unit is distinct from the element unit, which is the parent. So we have some groups in there that correspond to particular elements and some that are not. We have information whether an element it's required or repeatable. We have the position within the parent. So this gives, and this was an element when I showed this to our working group a couple of weeks ago. And Anton, you are not, were you in that session or were you? Yeah, you were
Yeah,
you were
I was in
you
the
were oh
session.
I missed up with another one where you were not present. But yeah, so this was one of the things that we that came into question. Do we really need this in the XML? The order of the elements is important. So if you switch around two elements, that then the XML file will not validate. And the idea is to say, okay, anything that is regarding the structure of the XML file, then the XML schema file is the normative definition. And in here, we would kind of only describe it for like a common understanding. And so the position within the parent would then give you an understanding which of those elements appear in which order, which is also the order in which they appear in this document here for them. And so it kind of shows you a bit about the structure. We would need to make this clear in the introductory text. This is an non-normative property here. But yeah, still a question whether this is actually helpful or just, yeah, it's not useful and it might lead to more confusion. I also made some changes if we compare this, for instance, to the Lattimore core documentation. So for me personally, style-wise, Lattimore core term list, they were the distinction here between the properties and the classes is a bit too dominant and too colorful. So I toned this down a bit. And yeah, then we have some modified and in the term versions. I also thought about maybe whether I should play with the styling and then make those lower elements a bit more compact. I don't know, I have 2 blocks or something like that, so it's easier to get all of the relevant information within one view. And then of course we have other elements where we have like additional nodes or examples and yeah, things like that. And also like historic nodes. So for the elements that were added in later sub versions. And then there's one thing that I have not implemented yet, I think. Because for some elements we have, as I said, when there were changes in the element's name or the parent name, means the XPath has changed. And for the compatibility reasons, we still keep the old one, even though, but we mark it as deprecated. But I also would like to put in here the deprecated XPath, so it is clear if you are searching for something or don't understand why is a certain element not going to not found or so have this historic information about, oh yeah, in a previous version it used to be there, but again this is something that could also lead to more confusion as it is helpful. So just question in the round. Any thoughts on that?
Looks very complete. So stepping back just sort of to the higher level, is this all then this approval of version 2? I assume we're sort of on the path to version 3. This is as a stepping stone, is just to show how things have evolved, or is there going to be a technology for harvesting, etc., that that is going to be using this in an RDF form?
Yeah, that's let me answer this by going the other way around. So we have gotten ABCD 3 and like make a fresh start, and ABCD 3 is like, if you look at close to it, actually 2 parts. You have the XML component and you have the ontology, and they are kind of using each other, but the idea was more to have like a more flexible pool of terms that is more suitable for semantic enrichment. However, the vast or even like really big majority of all of the documents out there is still ABCD 2, and particularly with the issues of the BioWiki farm and the TEDWiki Terms Wiki, which is hosted there, that used to be the place for documentation for ABCD2 terms. So if you want to have like a question about a particular element or something to look it up, there is, well, now that we have the insufficient version of the BioWiki farm back, I mean, it is possible, but it's not really nice. So this is also the goal here is to like bring ABCD2 to a level to make a nice round finished package. So have all of the terms proper documented, being aware that even if ABCD2 is not a standard that we are going to push much further in the future, it is still one that is actively used. And yes, we also would have liked a much bigger switch to ABCD3 also quite a while ago. But first, like finishing up this, and then once this is done, it's at least the ABCD3 XML part is pretty much the same. It's quite similar in the general structure, but we cut out all of the old stuff that we had kept for backward compatibility reasons. We made some cleanup in that regard, but from the XML experience, ABCD3 XML is relatively similar to ABCD2. Whereas for the ABCD3 ontology, this is something where we need to take a closer look of whether this approach was actually worth the or is still worth pursuing, even though we haven't seen big adoption of this yet. And now with certain other trends in the community, like the emerging Darwin Core package approach from GBIF. This is something where we just might to see how we are going to position this in the future landscape. So certainly the terms for ABCD3 that we now have as a semantic terms on this, it's pretty much a beta release. There are certainly a lot of potential just to reuse this in other contexts, but for now we're going to focus on the documentation of ABCD2 and then similar ABCD3 XML, and then have to see how we are going to proceed with ABCD3 the ontology.
Okay, thank you.
Does this kind of answer your question?
I'm just putting in the gaps. So that's good. That's good.
Bit wider approach, because it's the landscape is changing and has changed since we put out this pre-release version of the ontology. Okay, which brings me back here, and let me just so that's in your documentation. We are also going to extract the vocabulary for some of the terms, even though we are not going to do this for all of them. So for some, it's really useful to have a dedicated vocabulary, and this can then be aligned with the similar terms from Darwin Core. So for instance, the record basis or basis of record for Darwin Core, there's a lot of similar terms or identical terms, but also some that are a bit distinct. So having those as a dedicated vocabulary is really necessary. But then we have some historic terms where it's we expect a certain numeric code in a field, and it's for the XML, it's programmed in as just an extensive list of those codes. For that, even though technically it would be like a vocabulary, we are not going to define it as such, because there's no real gained value of referring to those codes that come from an old historic standard, HISPIT or something like that, as dedicated terms. So this is then only part of the documentation which elements go into it. So that is pretty much the summary for the documentation. Of course, we need some other additional documents. So for now, we only have in here the this single one, but of course, we are going to also make a quick primer, or let's see which one does Latimer Core have, the subpages. So we the guide, the resources, yeah. There's a quick reference guide and the resource pages. Okay. Yeah. And this is like mostly curational work now. It's not really tricky, or doesn't really require community input for that. It's more of documenting what is already there, and then updating existing documents, in particular the quick reference guide. And then one point we identified when we were looking at this in our group was that we also, in terms of styling, going to make, for instance, the bold labels, yeah, as regular fonts, just to give like yeah, the bold a bit of a distinguished meaning. So but yeah, small styling changes that we are going to do to this, similar as we did with the property RDF type. And yeah.
I like that actually better. I think it's good. By the way, mids is also another example of static gen 2. If you want to see that one.
Yeah,
It's got
yeah.
something, so yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was wondering, there was, I thought there was one with a bit more, so I kind of expected it.
It's quite a bit different just because it's different structure and things.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, it's the draft. Yeah, and the good point now that I see the mappings. So it's not in here yet, but yeah, Ben has, when we developed that, you can define the mappings for each term. So for each term within that, you can define the SSSOM mappings. So once you have a file to that, those information show up right next to the dedicated term, which is really useful and quite a good way to go. The only problem is that we only have, well, no, we do have, for instance, here the mappings from ABCD to MIDS. But I guess the much more useful ones are the ones from ABCD to Darwin Core, which we don't have in mixed format. We have it's kind of hidden within our own yeah, internal working table, and on the Darwin Core side, it's also a bit quick reference guide. So Darwin, oh, that's the okay. So for Darwin Core, they have the documentation done, format done by Steve Baskov. They have near the property ABCD equivalence, which is also in usually it just says not in ABCD, even for some of the terms where it does. So it's not conclusive. And then they just have the XML path here, again done for historic reason, but I guess this could also use some updates. But yeah, we can also use this just to maybe at least get a head start with the generation of the SSSOM mapping. Anton.
Yeah, now that you're speaking about the mappings, I wonder if each of or several standards are documenting mappings to other standards, whether there's some kind of automated way to combine them in a bigger graph to query them jointly, so to speak. So if you're interested in finding out about mappings between all of the standards, is this possible, or do they still live in isolation, so to speak?
That as for the moment, that's not possible. That is at least a question that's on the on the document for the TEDWIG mapping task group. But there also we are still quite early on in the process for the so this is probably something that we want to look into this to see, like, have a place where all of the different mappings can be queried, or at least where you are able to find the mappings, just to know in particular which other standard has done mappings to my standard, for instance. And yeah.
We need to get everybody into start using the triple SOM specification. Once we do that, the formats will be the same and the fields will be the same, and then we can start combining these things.
Yeah.
But it's all very, very new.
And
Okay, thank
but
you.
it's since we have written the sorry, not the agenda, but the missing the term, the work plan for the mappings task group. Some things have changed, and that we, or at least I see a lot of more adoptions of the triple SOM format, and so I get initially the idea was to use this task group as a first step, just to figure out which is the best way to go. But for me at the moment, this seems pretty clear cut that triple SOM is the biggest contender in the room there. There might also be others, but other ways. But I know that this approach here for Darwin Core, I know it's historic, but it feels a bit outdated. But yeah. Yeah, which is a good point, just to just remind. I guess most of you are aware of it, but on Tuesday evening we have the meeting of the mappings task group. Okay, and then yeah, that's leaves me with the other point of upcoming work. Well, I kind of already yeah, hinted at it. So of course I want to finish the documentation here, and then the submit ABCD 2 for the re-ratification. Still, as I said, a couple of more terms that we need to refine the documentation or the definitions. But yeah, it's actually not that much work. It's just yeah, I just need to find the time to actually sit down and do this, or just find good parts that I can delegate to other people. Yeah, but the clear goal is to have this done by this summer, but latest prior to the TEDWIG or the Living Data Conference in October. And yeah, and then also maybe have once this is done and we have we are closed for the submission for the re-ratification, have another meeting of this group just to give everybody a last look at it and have some internal feedback before we give it to the wider TEDWIG public review, or TEDWIG internal review as a first step, and then TEDWIG public review as a second step. Yeah, that brings me. Oh yeah, it says I closed this application, and yeah, then still any other business. If anybody else has some other questions or remarks or anything. Yeah, Jutta?
I have a question. And that is, so it's a bit in the context that Darwin Core seems to be going into like application layers, so of structure. So like before it was all this bag of terms, and now it should have this application profile. So there should be structure.
Yeah.
So ABCD so that's a question. ABCD in my mind always had structure because of the XML approach. So what you're publishing now on the Tedwick webpage would be kind of like a step back and publishing just a bag of terms for now. Is that
No.
correct?
It's always complementary. So the structure is still defined by the XML schema. It's still an XML format. What we are now doing is the proper definition of the terms and documentation of the terms. So far, we have like historically the documentation was within the XML schema, but then if you have if you're reusing a certain term, for instance, like for the person, the name, and it gets reused as, I don't know, dataset owner and gathering agent, you cannot like distinguish the definitions for those terms because it's like always person, no matter the context. And here we now have a proper definition for every single term within the different contexts that they can appear in. But we still have the accompanying XML schema document, which defines the structure. And it's, yeah, XML, ABCD has a lot of structure, maybe a bit too much with the different nestings and so on. But that the only thing that changes is that we now have proper definition or documentation of the definitions. And it's, so if, hold on, maybe quickly share my screen again. So we had the Tedwick Terms Wiki. And let's pick one of the ABCD elements. So, and this used to look a bit better, and but at least the server is back now after close to 1.5 years of not being accessible, and so you can see in here there's like the XPath and the definition, and but that's not a good way to have a documentation. Also, you cannot really browse because on some pages you just get an error message. If we look at how it used to look, let me see, bookmark. So if you look at the Wayback Machine for that particular page, so no, it's not in there. Okay, that's too bad. Okay, and so for some it helps to just call up the Internet Archive page, but in this case it also doesn't. And so there's, if somebody asks me, how do I map a certain kind of information, and I want to respond with, yeah, just use that particular element, and here's the definition for it. I currently don't really have a good possibility just to send a link and say, look here, that's the element. Here are a couple of examples, and here's the XPath. Here's the position within the XML that this element goes. So yeah, we are now only having proper documentation for the terms we already have. Does this help your question?
Yeah, so that answers that question. I'm better to understand. I always liked your old documentation, I have to say, the one in the wiki that I know, yeah, it would be nice if you would transfer that into the Tadwig side as non-normative, because I found it really helpful. I have to say I've used ABCD a lot. One question I have, and that relates, it also relates a bit to the ABCD3. I have to admit, I never really understood the ontology. And maybe it is like a reason why people are not picking up on it is that they don't really understand from the web page how it is supposed to work. And yeah, kind of like maybe it a way to push it and to have people use it more, because it's quite obvious that you put a lot of work into it, is to find a way to describe what it wants to do or how it is different from the XML structure. For example,
Yeah.
that is also a question I would have. So how is the XML structure different from the ontology? Yeah, so that's some feedback to ABCD3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. Thanks for the feedback. Yes, we really need to overthink the way we are communicating our goal here and how those two parts of ABCD relate to each other. Yeah, that certainly is an issue that like we haven't seen like much uptake for the usage there. Occasionally people are using it for individual terms, which was also kind of the bit of the idea, just to have this take the concepts we have a bit out of this diff structure of ABCD XML and give it like a bit more of a bag of terms that you can pick and choose from depending on your use case. This is certainly something that we need to look at in the future, how that we can foster proper usage of those possibilities.
There was also,
I'm wondering
if I can add something to this, there was really a practical problem with ABCD3, which was developed in the context of a project of the German Research Foundation. And actually, we had in the work plan that we wanted to develop application schemas for particular applications showing how ABCD3 can be used. And in reality, we needed so much time to develop the schema and to describe the it was not a schema, so to develop the ontology and describe all the concepts. You know, there are many of them in ABCD. So that at the end of the project, we really didn't have this time anymore to provide a convincing use case and pilot application. And that was a big problem, actually. So that's why. So actually, what we would need to do is actually to find a nice application where we can show the concepts behind ABCD3.
I'm wondering now that you're describing it, I'm wondering if it's actually a bit similar to Latimer Core, which also it's not completely a bag of terms, but it has things in classes, and classes are have relationships. And we also have difficulties kind of like so that I'm wondering if there's similarities and if it would make sense to get together and talk about this, where you don't have a full-fledged application profile, but you still want to give structure, and it should be something that is actually useful to people and how to do that. So maybe that's an idea.
Yeah, that could certainly be an approach. So, and also just to figure out the overlap between the different standards. And I mean, yes, this would also be a good case for mappings. But then on the other hand, also to a certain point, we should really raise the question on why then do we need two different terms? And if we have this bag of terms and mix and choose, shouldn't we be much better at fostering like reuse from different vocabularies, and then not saying, oh no, we just use one standard to cover everything, but have like terms from 5 different standards in there.
And there's also
Stan.
I also want to when you mentioned the issue of, let's say, all the different ways that a person can show up in ABCD as an identifier, as a borrower, as a, whatever, collector. So one of the sort of more abstract sort of ontology efforts a few years ago in Tadwig was, I think it was the attribution ontology work that there was a group there, and they cited the provenance ontology that is a wider, W3C, almost kind of an ontology pattern concept, relationships, whatever. It seems like we should also be bringing in those kinds of patterns to our ontology thinking. And I wonder if there's some input or pathway to see that influence inside of ABCD3, for example, where roles and the person would be documented in that way. Or yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? That's not very articulate, but
just like a better inheritance, if you want to say, from
or following
external
patterns,
base standards, because it's there's no need in like redefining a person, because it's been done 1,000 times already. Yeah. Well, if there are,
it would be good to do all the mappings, because then after we have the mappings and the graph, Anton, that you proposed, then we will see kind of like where we have redundance and where we have little clusters of terms that then we can decide how to structure and how it might look like altogether.
It might be that this super graph might create a bad impression of what Tadwig is doing, actually, with thousands and thousands of terms, duplicate definitions, and so forth. But I think it's worth doing it and just to sort things out and to get a better overview of what's going on in the different standards.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for this update. I also have to run.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you all for being here and for the nice discussion. And yeah.
See you in Colombia.
or hopefully earlier in the summer when I have invite you for another round to show you the results of the progress so far.
Cheers.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. This was helpful.
Bye.
Bye.